Hello and welcome to episode 114 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm James Whittingham. This week, the all-electric F-150 Lightning is the best value vehicle you could buy, period. That is until I hack into Brian's Tesla and claim it as my own.
Americans will soon be able to buy solar panels from IKEA. The panels are called Flukengruben, and all you need to install them is an Allen key. And a crew of 10 people.
A quarter of EV charging stations in the Bay Area are broken. The other 75% have been taken over by seagulls.
An autonomous cargo ship has completed a 500-mile voyage. It wasn't planned that way, but the ship's computer became sentient and declared, "I'm the captain now."
All that and more on this exciting edition of the Clean Energy Show.
So, James, last week we had that discussion about that nuclear power plant in Finland, and we had a listener write in from Finland and approved of our my pronunciation of the name of the power plant, which I'm not going to say again because I don't want to ruin my perfect record.
You got a record.
Pronouncing it.
You grow at 100%. If you're batting, 1,000, you retire.
Yeah. Anyway, it made me think of a story. So I used to work in radio. My first job ever was in radio at a top 40 radio station. And I was 17 years old, and I would do the midnight shift, midnight to 6 in the morning, playing like top 40 radio. But I also had to do the newscast every hour on the hour. And you would literally go to the teletype machine because, this is the 1920s. But we had a teletype machine, and I would have to sort of rip off the pages of the copy from broadcast news, and I would read a little, 5-minute newscast at the top of every hour. So when I was 17, I was reading this news copy at 2 in the morning, and one of the stories was about Quesnel, BC, this town in Canada. Are you familiar with how Quesnel, BC is spelled, how the name is spelled?
No.
It's spelled Quesnel. There's an S in there. It's a weird spelling, but it's pronounced Quesnel. But here I am, I'm 17 years old, I'm on the radio, I'm reading this ad copy. I'd never seen it in print before, and I said, Quesnel, BC. And sure enough, somebody phoned at 2 in the morning to complain that I had pronounced it wrong. And I was mortified. I was absolutely mortified, because as soon as they said that, I'm like, oh, of course it's Quesnel. I'm an idiot. But anyway, so I like to pay attention to how things are pronounced.
And that was a lesson you learned as a young 17-year-old DJ, when people actually listened at 2 a.m. who had oh my God, I can't believe that. That just seems so. Gather around, grandkids, because that's a story you won't hear nowadays. There's like 3 people listening to FM at that hour.
Yeah, no, it was an AM radio station. We were kind of low on the dial, so we had pretty big reach. Like, the signal would carry thousands of miles. And every once in a while, you would get we'd get postcards from like places like Finland and Sweden. Like people, you would sometimes, the signals could travel because they would bounce off the clouds of the atmosphere. So you would occasionally get listeners from all over the world.
Well, okay, Brian. This week I did some testing of high definition audio streamers, Amazon Music, yes, and Apple Music. And I wanted to see, because we were talking about getting these new streamers that didn't charge any more than the normal price, and you got CD quality sound or better. And in some cases, master, like this equivalent of the master they had in the studio, which, by the way, takes up more bandwidth than anything else. More than 4K video with Atmos. It takes up a lot of bandwidth. So you have to download those songs, which I did. It's, it's diminishing returns. You really don't need to go quite that high. You could go half that high and still appreciate the sound. So I hooked up some speakers, and I realized that there's a lot of barriers to this whole HD sound stuff. Like, you need equipment to do it. Well, for one thing, I have okay stereo equipment, but it's not spectacular in any place of the house. So there's that. I have okay headphones, but they're not spectacular. And one thing, I saw an ad, though, because I was watching Saturday Night Live, and Arcade Fire was the musical guest, and they were running ads throughout the show saying new album out in Atmos. So, of course, James was intrigued and had to bite.
Yeah.
If no one else did, I would be the guy who did. And I couldn't figure it out. Like
What?
they say that you could use headphones for Atmos and have immersive audio. And I've got a few decent pairs of headphones around, and none of them did. I'd be the first person to know. Like, you'd have to do it on your phone. My phone is an Android. It only goes up to 48 hertz, 24-bit 48 hertz. And it says it's Atmos capable, which I thought was odd.
Yeah.
And nothing.
Well, I've got the Apple AirPods, which are supposed to support Atmos.
Right.
And I was able to get them to work. And it does sound a little bit better, a little bit more spatial. But I was listening to an audiobook with my AirPods. And you can now turn on spatial when you're just listening to an audiobook or, presumably a podcast or something. And then it places the sound somewhere in front of you. And then if you turn your head, the sound stays in the same place.
Doesn't that
It's a weird, freaky sensation. Yeah, it's very strange.
Yeah. So you have to pay extra for the headphones to have the sensors in them to do that. And because we've been talking a lot about audio quality of podcasts on the show, but you like it?
No, and I think it's fun. I do like listening that way. And I think Apple announced that they're going to support Dolby Atmos for podcasts.
Really? Are you serious?
Yeah. So we could release our podcast.
Brian, how could we not? How could we not? This is going to cause problems for me, and yet I won't be able to resist.
We can have all of our voices just spinning around the room at all times.
Just constantly sort of on a circular round table treadmill, you going in one direction and me in the other until people vomit. No one ever puts people in left and right stereo. They always put them in the center, right?
Yeah.
I always wondered why you put just a hint off center. Why did people not do that?
I did that when we recorded our audio commentary track for the movie that we made. Mm-hmm. So we put an audio commentary track on the Blu-ray or the DVD. And there was 3 of us. So I put Laura in the middle, and then you and I were slightly to the left and right of her. But that's unusual.
I've
no one
never
ever
listened to that on my stereo. How does that sound? Did it work out well?
Yeah, it's a very subtle. I didn't want to go overboard, but no, I like it. I think it should always be like that.
And it's not, is it? Most are not like that.
Yeah. It's just boring. It's always in the center.
Yeah. I mean, people are listening to it on their home theater systems because they're watching movies, ostensibly. So I had nothing to really do this with. And the Amazon Music streaming app on my Apple TV box does not support. It supports lossless, but it doesn't support anything HD or, spatial or anything like that. I'd have to use the Fire Stick to do that. And I don't want to switch back to that. I have one laying around, but I don't want to switch back to that. The Apple does. The Apple Music on Apple streaming box does work. However, it's not HD. They don't go too far into HD, and they do have the Atmos. So I enjoyed some things in that. And it's interesting that people take a lot of different approaches to music. And some of them are very subtle and interesting, and some of them are why they even call this Atmos, because they haven't done hardly anything at all. And then some go overboard and put, the drums in your left rear behind you somewhere and tambourine to your right or something like that. And that can be interesting sometimes. At least you're listening. So, it's interesting. There's very different approaches to the way they're mixing music in Atmos.
No, and I can listen to Dolby Atmos in my home theater, and I listened to a couple of the Beatles albums just because they were available, and I wanted to try that out. Yeah. And Bohemian Rhapsody is a good one by Queen. They have a Dolby Atmos mix of that, and that's fun because the sound is everywhere.
I'd also recommend The Best of the Doors in Atmos. You got your Riders of the Storm, so you've got your rain coming down throughout the whole song on top of you, but then there's other songs they seem to do a nice job as well. And my son was very into Kendrick Lamar releasing his new album this week, and so we had to listen to that. And a little bastard. He's like, oh, this is going to be the greatest album of halfway through of 2022, and sure enough, the next day the reviewers are all saying that. The best album of the 2020s, rather, and it's profound and prolific and all that. I didn't quite pick up on all that, but he knows what he's doing. He's a little music critic, he is. So that was that. So basically, if I wanted full studio quality master audio, I would have the only way I got it was going through the sound card, the external sound card that I use, which is fairly high end for the podcast. It costs a couple $100, has the capability of 192 hertz, kilohertz or hertz, 192 and 24-bit. So I did that, and then I ran an analog out into my stereo, into my older speakers, and it sounded great. You listen to the Beatles, and it's freaky to hear something from so long ago that sounds so good and is mixed so well, because they keep remixing them to modern standards and things like that. So it's cool.
Yeah, no, I have the Yellow Submarine movie on Blu-ray, and that was one of the first where they'd remixed it for 5.1, and yeah, it was fantastic. I loved it.
Yeah, there's always something, I really do appreciate movies in Atmos, but sometimes they don't seem to be really well done. But Jaws is really well done. The shark attack music, you've never heard it like that before until you've seen it in Atmos. It's really cool and really nicely done. So other than that, I don't have the best setup. You need speakers in your ceiling. Atmos is complicated.
James, I think you're going to need a bigger sound system.
I'm going to need a bigger sound system, a bigger house, a bigger theater, and a bigger bank account or something like that. I don't know.
And a bigger boat.
Well, the thing is, Brian, when I had kids, I stopped caring about this stuff. And now that the kids are growing up, I'm starting to care about it again. So it's problematic. But yeah, I don't know.
I wanted to mention that I ordered a couple of electric bikes.
Excuse me?
Yes, this is for the cottage. We've never had bikes out there, and I've been meaning to kind of solve this problem for a long time. So I ordered 2 electric bikes. The company's called Ride One Up. And our friend Don in Toronto had bought one, and he took delivery a few weeks ago, and he really liked it. So, I went ahead, and now everything's kind of backed up because of the supply chain. So they initially were supposed to come in mid-June, but of course they've already announced their first delay, and it's more like mid-August. But I kind of expected that there's delays all over the place. These bikes are very good. They're very popular. They're very highly reviewed on Electrek and other places. So they're definitely in demand. But
well, tell us about them. I don't know anything about them.
Well, they're kind of it's a gravel bike. So it's like a mountain bike, but a little less serious than a mountain bike. They're very slim and slender and light, which is the kind of bike that I like. And the battery is in the interior of the tubes, but it's kind of a small battery, but it's so small that it really doesn't even look like an electric bike. It's looks kind of like a normal bike.
Hey, and have you tested your bike this year since you did the soldering?
Yes, I did the soldering, and my Fido electric bike does work, and I've ridden it a couple of times, and that's awesome.
So you're going to take that out there and a couple for the family? Is that the idea?
Yeah. So, we want to have a couple of bikes we can leave out there.
And you're not going to leave yours because yours is a fold-up bike. I thought that's kind of why you bought it.
Yeah. That one will travel, but these 2 will live out at the lake.
So what else is unique about them other than the fact that they have durable tires that aren't too thick for off-road, so they're gravel? That's kind of an interesting thing. Riding on gravel is a different experience than anything else. And it's kind of a sluggish endeavor. I know the local mountain biking club does Sunday gravel grinders, they call them. They go out to the valley and go up and down hills on gravel and kill themselves because they like doing that for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
But I find gravel tedious. But I did take my electric bike out on gravel to explore the countryside on the prairies here. And it's a nice way to do it because you don't find the tedium of it. You get to, you can pretend you're on pavement, but you're not riding against yourself, the rolling resistance.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not really planning to ride on gravel, but there's trails out at the lake. So I'll probably use it kind of more like a city bike and more like a mountain bike. But it's, I don't know. I kind of like that position between the 2. It's not quite a road bike. It's not quite a mountain bike. It's between the 2. And it only has 1 gear, and it has a belt drive, not a chain drive.
Oh.
So you never have to oil it or anything. It should be super, super low maintenance.
Well, that's interesting. Probably quiet too, I imagine.
And it should be quieter. Yeah.
Well, keep us updated on how they go when you get them and take some pictures. And so, Brian, the continent of Africa is welcoming the Clean Energy Show as we are now on Boomplay, which is the African music service, the Spotify of Africa. And we are, as of last Wednesday, now on Boomplay. So, hello, Africa.
Hello.
We don't talk to you very often.
But we will now more.
We will now more. So, it's interesting. I was looking at the local Facebook page on the electric car forum this morning. Somebody made a point that electric car stations, charging stations on the highways, we see them going up in small towns that don't have hardly anything. Usually they have a gas station. But he made the interesting point, Eric Corner made the point that he thinks that this is the future for some small, almost dead towns, that there will be, retail and washrooms outside of these charging places as more, hardly anybody has electric cars in North America yet. Wait till that becomes 50, 75%, then these things are going to become huge for those towns.
Yeah, no, every town will have a charger, which is not the case now.
And that's the place that you'll be using them the most is on the highway. And he suggests maybe even food trucks could participate if, on a busy long weekend or something, and farmers markets, antique stores, and museums. So I thought that was an interesting take and probably true. Yeah, so that's something that I should add to my 2040 project that I'm working on. By the way, I want to push that back. I want to push it back because I want some time to ruminate on that. So I'm just keeping notes. So we'll have it by the fall, by the beginning of the fall season, beginning of September at the latest, I promise. But it's something I'm interested in. It's called the 2040 Project, where we will write about what life will be like in our city that we live in, and you can extrapolate that to the rest of the world. And a lot of things that involve food and disruption and other things like that. Now for some updates to some stories. Brian, Elon Musk seems to be backing out of the Twitter deal, and I'd like to know how you honestly feel about it. Because you're a fanboy, and I'm just getting really pissed off with Elon Musk. I just listened to him on a podcast. He says 5% of Twitter accounts are fake, more than 5%, and he's getting cold feet because he says they say there's 5% fake and he thinks there's more. And what do you think about the whole thing?
Well, meanwhile, the whole stock market has kind of tanked since then, so his offer price now is probably too high.
Yeah.
So maybe he's trying to renegotiate a lower price, but mostly it doesn't have anything to do with clean energy, so I just don't care that much.
No, I hope he does back out, though, because I don't want who on there. They seem to, Tesla's also announced that they're abandoning plans to enter the Indian market, at least for now. The automaker says that the government won't change its mind on high import tariffs for foreign electric vehicles, which is too bad. And it's probably going to be a while before Tesla's in a position to open a factory there.
No, and I don't think they have, they don't have any presence there at all. So, they've got to build a supercharger network too. And that's a massive job in a large country like India. So, it was maybe premature anyway, but, and of course there's speculation that they'll eventually really have to design a different car for India because, Teslas are typically too expensive for what is typically sold in India. So maybe once they have something smaller and cheaper, then that'll be the time for them to go back into India. Or maybe that's where they will design something smaller and cheaper when they eventually open up a Chinese or an Indian factory.
Well, coming up in a couple of minutes, I'm going to talk about John Oliver's show on HBO last week tonight because they did a thing on the power of utilities. But you wanted to talk about Russia and them cutting off the power.
We've been talking about Finland lately, so let's bring up Finland again.
Since we have at least one listener there.
Yes.
Hello.
Anyway, there's been further developments in that story. Of course, one of the things that's happening in Europe is, of course, there's a war going on. Russia is waging a war against Ukraine, and this is changing everybody's supply chains for oil and gas because Russia's a big supplier of those things, and now nobody wants to buy their oil or gas from Russia, but, in some cases they have to. The electricity grid is also something that Russia sometimes shares with other countries, so they do export electricity to a country like Finland, which is right next door. But so there's a story here from the BBC, Russian operator to suspend electricity supply to Finland. So Russia has decided they're no longer going to supply electricity to Fingrid, which, as we know from previous shows, is the name of the electricity grid in Finland.
Easy to say.
And it's a little confusing as to what happens, but Russia is claiming that Finland is not paying them or owes them money or something. So who knows if that's actually true, or maybe Finland just doesn't want to pay them anymore.
Maybe they don't want to pay in rubles. That's the issue.
And they don't want to pay in rubles. It doesn't mention that in the story. It's still kind of vague, according to the story from the BBC, exactly what is happening. But the upshot is that Russia is going to stop exporting electricity to Finland. But Finland says it's not a huge deal. It's only about 10% of their supply has been coming from Russia, so they can increase their own production and they can increase imports from Sweden to kind of make up the difference. And, their nuclear power plant, once that comes online in the summer or the fall, then, that should solve any issues there.
It's interesting to see these countries doing the most they can to screw Russia, to say no to Russia, to not take their energy. But at the same time, they kind of need it, and they're sort of determining how far they can go. And it's interesting to watch that because it's evolved since the start of the Ukraine war, and it's become more aggressive, and they're calling on more aggressive plans too, aren't they?
It's an interesting problem what you do because, of course, nobody wants to strike back militarily at Russia because, they have a finger on the nuclear button, and nobody wants that. But we have all these other means, and one of the means is to stop paying them for stuff, stop paying them for electricity or oil and gas, or try and get out of any kind of deals. So, yeah, it's a kind of an interesting way to wage war in the 21st century.
All right. Well, just before the show, I came across a tweet, and it's one of those things where I wish I had more time. But I saw that John Oliver was talking about, I don't watch the show every Sunday night, but he's talking about utility grids and utility grid monopoly specifically, and how in the United States that those grids are set up as monopolies. And that was fine because they had to build the whole grid, but there was an agreement with the states, and usually it means you can build new power projects, but you can only keep about 10% of the profits, which is modest. But so now you've got people putting solar on their houses, and so they can't take a piece of that. And, the board members, the CEOs, they all want their piece. They all want to get rich and become richer white people than they were before and golf more. It's just not working out for them. So on the new project side, it's becoming a bit of a problem. So one of the terrible examples he pointed out was in South Carolina, where they tried to build 2 nuclear reactors. And unlike the ones that you talked about last week, these ones never got off the ground.
The problem is they can also be shameless in increasing spending even when it is not needed or on projects that are actively falling apart. Take South Carolina. When utilities there tried to add 2 nuclear reactors to an existing plant, the project's cost spiraled. And a massive federal investigation later revealed that executives at South Carolina Electric and Gas and its parent company knew the project was facing major delays and cost overruns, but withheld that information in order to keep it going. Meanwhile, local customers paid more than $2 billion in the form of higher bills for a project which, by the way, never generated any power.
That's right, Brian. $2 billion for nothing. Zip. Nada.
Wow. That's, well, we're in an interesting position because, yes, like we've discussed before, building these electricity grids in the first place was a big deal, and it really kind of needed government. And our province, where we live in Canada, is the perfect example of that. Here we are in the province of Saskatchewan, which is about 5 times the size of Texas. It's a massive, large territory with only about 1 million people in it. And everybody's spread out, and building that electricity grid was a massive undertaking that really required the kind of socialist governments that we had at the time when all that was built. But as we move into the 21st century here, like the future really is decentralized, deregulated, and demonopolized grids, because we just simply don't need that kind of government oversight anymore. We don't need the monopolies anymore. They were kind of needed at one point, and in the US, certain utilities were given monopoly power over certain areas so that they would build the grid that we needed. But we're in this transition period, and we got to get away from these monopolies.
In our case, if it was for profit, they probably would have built it in the cities, and the farmers wouldn't have had power for decades. Which reminds me, this is a good time to bring this up. My wife was talking about how her grandma used to have a little wind generator on their farm, and that this was quite common, in the 1930s and 40s. And it would power the light bulbs, because that is before the power company got there. Wind turbines were a lifeline for them. They were a big deal, and if it broke down, you were in the dark. And, the winters can be short here. So that was a big deal.
Yeah. No, you often still see them on farms around here, those little, farm wind turbines. And I think sometimes they use them just like to pump out ditches and stuff like that, that they're sort of purpose built.
Yeah. A lot of the early solar companies around here were agricultural based, where they would sort of circulate water for cows and things like that, and the sloughs. But anyway, renewables are threatening this system because it's democratizing energy, right?
Yeah. And of course, in many places there is still a monopoly. So if you want to be on the grid, you have to deal with them in some way. And of course, some jurisdictions have clamped down on rooftop solar, like they've just, passed laws basically against it or made the terms very bad because they're losing their monopoly position. But, we're very close to the point where you can just buy the panels yourself, buy a bunch of batteries yourself, and just say goodbye to the grid. So, they're playing with fire by annoying their customers like this.
And here's a clip talking about solar companies being affected.
Can deliberately stifle innovation that might make power cheaper or be a net benefit to society, as this solar power executive will tell you.
Now solar is becoming real. These utility monopolies are saying, well, wait a minute, we got to crush it before it gets too big. They want to build more plants so they can make more money. And if we take a little bite out of that apple and we say, hey guys, we got solar panels everywhere on all these homes and you don't need to build that many more power plants, then the utility goes, well, wait a minute, how am I going to make more money next year?
Yeah, exactly. People putting up solar panels and generating their own electricity threatens the anti-competitive structure of a utilities monopoly, so they're obviously going to try and step in and block it. Who wants competition?
It's crazy. It's great. It makes me mad, okay? It makes me mad because I hear the same rhetoric that we heard here from our government, who shut down decent, usable solar agreements and tariffs and feed-in tariffs, and what else? The sort of a rebate. So, and they were saying, well, it's just going to make power more expensive for everyone. I wonder if it's going on here. I wonder if there's some of that going on here, that the structures of the CEOs and the people in power are not going to make their bonuses if renewables become too competitive. So this is what we're working against. It's not only big oil, it's big utility.
Yeah, it's shocking. And, of course, we're in the midst of a global climate emergency. So now is not the time to be discouraging solar. So speaking of solar, IKEA, the famous Swedish furniture retailer, which is found all over the world, is now going to start selling solar panels at their U.S. stores. But the thing that maybe surprised me the most was that solar panels are already available in 11 other markets from IKEA. So IKEA is not new to the solar game, just new to it in the United States. So yeah, I think that was interesting development from IKEA, who has been talking a lot about trying to be more environmentally responsible. So, let's hope that works.
Would you buy IKEA solar panels?
Yeah, I guess it would.
Sounds like a hard maybe.
It's a hard maybe. No, they still have some really interesting products. They have some interesting light bulbs and Wi-Fi controlled light bulbs and stuff.
Fixtures
Yeah. So it's always a bit tricky with IKEA. You've got to kind of research. Obviously a lot of the furniture is kind of disposable, which again they've talked about trying to get away from. But we'll see if they can actually do it.
All right. Well, the Ford F-150 Lightning all-electric pickup truck, as we know, has hit the market. They're making them. They're producing them. We don't have any where we are yet, but hope to see one soon. However, the reviews poured in last week as they took reviewers to, I believe, Galveston, Texas for a couple of days. And different YouTube reviewers and automotive journalists had a chance to review the Lightning and different variants of it, too. Apparently, universally, the $40,000 variant is an unbelievable value. That is the pro version, even though that's not the high-end version. It's actually the bottom version. That is the stripped-down version that they will sell to fleets. Construction companies that aren't taking it for towing a trailer on the highway. They've got a small range and a few less frills, although you can always upgrade the power output to 240 volts and stuff like that for running equipment if you want to. Ford says, interestingly, that it's going to only, the towing will only cut the range in half, which seems, decent. If that's the case, I don't know how they would have meant.
Or overly optimistic.
I don't know how they beat physics, because it's more like at least 2/3 and everything else. And they say it's going to be very similar to how the range in gas vehicles goes down. And you're going to be able to program the different trailers in, just like a seat. So you can say, I'm going to tow, if you're a business and you've got a big car hauling trailer, you can punch that one in and give it a name. And then it remembers it, and it remembers the gas mileage for it. So it's better able to estimate your range, which is really nice. And then it'll adjust for each trailer if you want to pull a camper in the summertime. Even the base unit of $40,000 weighs the payload in your back. I think that's impressive. So if you're beyond your payload, and then it actually calculates your range too by doing so. So that's cool. You can put like 4,000 pounds back there, and then it'll know, well, you're not going 450 kilometers today, son. It'll know. So,
but do you think they're actually making money on this $40,000?
Well, that's what everyone's asking, Brian. They're saying they can't possibly be making money on this. Like, these automotive journalists are quite blown away. And the phrase I keep hearing is, it's a lot of steel for that much money. A lot of metal for that much money, because it's a big vehicle. It weighs the same as the Rivian pickup truck, but it's full size, F-150 size. It's almost identical in shape to other Ford F-150s, and yet it weighs the same as the Rivian, which is a smaller class pickup truck for adventurers. So I think that's interesting. The base, I noticed, also has 2 motors, so it's all-wheel drive no matter what. And it's interesting to see these guys drive it on the highway at highway speed, and they tap the motor and lose friction, lose traction on the front tires. If you're towing something heavy on the back, because it's got that much torque.
Wow.
The idea is, the consensus is that this is the best pickup truck you can buy, especially for the money, because Rivian's quite pricey. It's got a premium vehicle. Now, interestingly, it can only charge at 150 kilowatts, which, as a prospective Bolt owner, which charges at 55, is great, but it's got to have a big battery in it, right? It's going to have something like 100 kilowatt battery to start with, or something like that. So it's a pretty big size battery. So that takes a long time to charge. But the interesting thing is that the charging curve is very high. Like, it doesn't ramp down at 40% or 50%. It stays way up there, close to full charge. People were saying like around 137 from the get-go all the way up to 80%. And then, even though Ford claims it'll go to 90%, it drops off pretty quickly, almost, falls completely off at 80%. But that's good. That's really good. So it doesn't matter all the time what speed your car charges at. It's that it's complicated, man, because the charging curve, if it's not charging at 150, that means nothing, right? So you want it to charge as much as possible at that charging speed. And we all know it's not going to on any battery past 80%. It's the fastest truck there is of any of the pickup trucks off the line. And it's only like $32,500 after U.S. rebates. That's insane. I mean, I'd buy one if I was an American. They could do everything for me. It would, it would take a trailer, it would drive around town, it would do everything.
Yeah. Are they even taking orders for those in Canada? Maybe you should look into that.
Well, the problem is the Canadian pricing is a bit higher. Oh, by the way, as I said in the intro, you have to buy 5 of them. This is the base one for a business. But if you're a business, you still get that rebate. And, that's incredibly, the operational costs without the oil changes and the maintenance. Well, Ford claims you're going to save 20%, but I got to say it's got to be more than that, especially with the gas prices the way they are now. It's got to be more than 20%. And these are selling for about the same price as similarly equipped gas and diesel F-150s. So the upper variants have a speaker in the headrest. Speaking of audio, I have no idea why they do that. They haven't mentioned why they do that. It seems like you're going to a lot of trouble if you're putting a speaker in the headrest right behind your head. I understand what spatial sound is, but that's like almost touching your head. And would that even be comfortable if it was blasting bass My glasses would rattle off my head. Yeah, the sound system, they say, is not bad at all in the base, and there's no heated seats, but I'm sure you could add those. Or maybe in Canada there's heated seats. Maybe in Canada it's not, the stripped down versions aren't quite as stripped down. And it's been revealed how they deal with towing, because, towing now creates a lot of, waste heat in your transmission, in this case in the motors, because your single speed motor is your transmission. So what they did is they have an AC cooling loop of fluid that goes through them anyway, and all they did is double that. They just put a second one in if you have the towing package for $2,000. And, as well as different camera setups and the actual tow hitch and all that. So, that's pretty cool. So that'll give you really good towing of pretty much any weight you want to tow. And Motor Trend came out with a review. Motor Trend is a well-respected magazine. I thought I'd read some of it to you. It says, Ford absolutely had to get its first ever electric truck right. And when the 2022 Ford F-150 Lightning, it damn well did. No joke, the Lightning is one of the most important pickup trucks, or vehicles really, in history. Forget early adopters, environmentalists, and technophiles. This truck has to convince construction workers, farmers, ranchers, surveyors, which is what my son is doing for a summer job, by the way.
Oh, yeah. My dad was a land surveyor.
It's a good profession if you can, my son's never going to have a cottage like your dad did because he was, different times. And everyday truck fans also have to be pleased. So they have to convince all these people that electric trucks just aren't only viable, but also desirable. And that an EV truck not only can do the work, but also do it better. It does that, says Motor Trend. To get to brass tacks, the Lightning is the best driving, best riding, and best handling F-150 you can buy. The only reasons not to buy one over a gas or diesel-powered F-150 are that you have nowhere to charge at home, you actually tow hundreds of miles at a time on a regular basis, or you simply don't like or won't let yourself like electric vehicles. All other reasons are invalid.
Wow. That's quite the rave review. That's amazing.
This is the Clean Energy Show.
We often talk about autonomous vehicles on this show, particularly cars, because a autonomous robotaxi type future is going to be an important piece of the kind of electric mobility going forward. So this story isn't really about electric mobility, but it is about autonomous vehicles. So Electrek has a story here. Autonomous cargo ship completes 500-mile voyage, avoiding hundreds of collisions, which is a funny headline because it makes it sound like it didn't avoid all of them. Oh, sure, there were collisions, but it avoided hundreds more. But anyway, so yeah, a 500-mile journey starting in the waters of Tokyo Bay, which is a very congested port. Mm-hmm. And the ship successfully navigated. So it made the trip 99% of the trip without human intervention. But it did say that it did make it out of port by itself. And this is an AI platform. Orca AI is the developer. And basically they collected data for a year before that. And so that's what we've talked about before, what Tesla is doing. They're, collecting data from their fleet, and it's an artificial intelligence, a neural network that is learning how to drive. But presumably this is slightly simpler on the ocean. Rush hour traffic in Los Angeles is probably a much harder problem to solve. And so, yeah, sure enough, after only a year of collecting data, they were able to do 99% of this trip autonomously. And that seems like a big deal for, the future of autonomous vehicles.
There's no cyclists, no construction workers, no streakers, no maybe the odd dolphin, but nothing too weird.
I mean, sharks, there's Jaws you got to watch out for.
Yes. I would think that the ocean is actually ripe for automation before streets are. And by the way, Brian, I'm bearish on robotaxis. I'm not feeling good about Tesla right now. I'll be honest with you. I don't know why you went out and bought e-bikes when your Tesla stock is in jeopardy. That's why I feel like you should be saving your money. Put it away under your mattress. So I just feel like, the progress is really slow. And it's not what they say it's going to be. And if they say that they can get the data and everything's going to come together, it's not working that way. I mean, right now they've got 100,000 FSD beta testers. You're not one of them, shamefully, possibly because of your driving style, possibly because of your, I don't know, association with this show, or it's the fact that you know me. Any of these things are possible. But they're going to, Elon says they'll do that. They'll expand it to 1 million by the end of the year. I say minimum a year from now in Elon time. I've got a translator built into my brain now. And I'm not sure. I'm skeptical. I mean, when you have it and we get to play with it, maybe my mind will change. But it seems like the updates are not killing it. Like they're not doing a whole much different than what they already are. And there's been some nasty news coverage of how terrible the mistakes that it's making, which is not fair, but still it gets out there. And at the same time, there are autonomous companies actually giving charging for robotaxi rides in San Francisco and Phoenix area and China. So I don't know what to think of it. Like,
and maybe they'll get there before Tesla, maybe, but Tesla's the only one with all that data and, with the ability to kind of farm all of that data to make a true kind of artificial intelligence. Everyone else is kind of doing the shortcut approach of solving a simpler problem.
Right.
But
they're mapping it. They're geofencing and they're mapping. However, I mean, at that rate, they're still working faster than Tesla is these days, it seems. Because Tesla theoretically will suddenly become self-aware and be able to drive like a human. And that seems like years and years away, maybe a decade away. I don't know. I don't want it to be.
Yeah.
I want it to be tomorrow.
I guess. It's hard to say. But so I made a joke at the top of the show about the autonomous ship and, I'm the captain now. What, do you think will this be valuable for, stopping pirates? Like if you just have an autonomous ship, it's kind of like, convenience stores, they put their safe is on a timer to discourage thieves.
Yes.
So like maybe an autonomous ship will discourage pirates because they can't take it over.
Will there be an override that can't be overridden? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
On board.
I don't know.
But maybe that override should be able to be overridden from, a helicopter or something nearby.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't heard too much about ship piracy. I think they're just avoiding the bad places off Somalia where it's been happening. So I don't know. I wanted to talk about the San Francisco Bay Area by coincidence because there's a report out that 1/4 of electric car stations, charging stations in the Bay Area are not working. And we've been talking a lot about this on the show because it has come to our attention that this is a huge, 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 huge issue outside of Tesla. Tesla has a fairly good reputation for keeping their chargers mostly working, right? And they'll fix them. Yeah. Maybe 1 or 2 are down, but it's a big stretch of stations.
They sometimes have vandalism where people are cutting off the cables and stealing like the copper out of them because the copper is valuable. But yeah, still they're doing a good job.
So over 27% of electric vehicle charging stations across San Francisco Bay Area are not functioning properly, according to a recently published study. The reliability of open public electric vehicle direct current fast chargers pointed to a recent survey where drivers of electric vehicles in California reported facing several issues at charging stations, from broken plugs and unexpected shutoffs during charging to payment issues. That would be a pisser if you're charging away and it just shut off. You think, oh, good, it's working.
Apparently that happens a lot.
And to accurately assess the reliability of these charging stations, the study looked into the efficiency of 657 charging plugs at 181 different stations throughout the Bay Area, and it did not include charging stations. So I'm concerned about this. I think there should be government action and a government policy that says that you have to keep your charging stations up and running at a fairly, respectable level. Because it seems like a conspiracy because the gas stations, the oil companies are getting into this, and those are the ones that aren't working. which is maddening.
Yeah, and I guess this is really the addendum to the Ford F-150 Lightning reviews from earlier in the podcast, is that the charging network is really part of the experience. Yeah. And if 25% of them are broken, which appears to be the case if you buy a car in the San Francisco Bay Area, that's going to affect your enjoyment of the vehicle quite a lot.
And that's not good, because that's where they actually have electric cars by a lot. So, there's an oil company, you see this all the time in the headlines, partnering up with charging companies, and the latest one, I noticed the headline said 360 kilowatts. So that's kind of the first time I've heard of beyond 350. So that's interesting that they're creeping up a little bit there. But like I say, it doesn't matter if your car doesn't charge, because a lot of modern cars only do 150, 175.
This is a story from Apple Insider. Aramco, which is a Saudi oil company, has recently regained the title of the most valuable company in the world. So this has been Apple for a while, but of course tech stocks have taken a hammering in the stock market lately. So Aramco is number one again. So this is a sign of the times. This is a result, presumably, of not only the tech stocks crashing in the stock market, but oil stocks on the way up, because oil prices are high. Here in Canada, $2.32 a liter, I think, now is the record on the West Coast. That's well over $8 a gallon. So, I don't expect this to last forever, that Aramco is not going to be the largest company forever, but it is for now.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of this inflation. This is an issue. The only thing that has been coming down is housing prices. Have been coming down the last couple of months because of, the interest rate hikes.
No one can afford to buy houses.
Yeah. And so you have to balance that, because you need a healthy housing market. And I don't know. Anyway, we love to hear from you at the Clean Energy Show, no matter where you live in the world. If you're in Africa, call us, speakpipe.com/Clean Energy Show, and leave a voicemail. Leave a voice message for us, which is always fun when people do that. Email us is how most people do it, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. We are on Twitter. We are on TikTok. Our handle there is Clean Energy Pod. And believe me, you want to be on the TikTok to see our smiling faces. Don't forget to check out our YouTube channel for special features of Brian. That brings us to the lightning round. The lightning round is where we skim through the rest of the week's headlines. Brian, I don't have a whole lot for you this week, because I'm a tired boy from not sleeping last night. New York City wants to take 25% of its street space away from cars in favor of a walkable, bikeable city. And the mayor is behind that. What do you think? I mean, it's getting kind of pointless now, isn't it, to drive in New York?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. I've only been to New York one time, and we rented bicycles. And it was fantastic, because they had a bike path that ran down the side of Manhattan. We biked over the Brooklyn Bridge, and it was absolutely the best way to get around New York. I thought it was fantastic. It's probably harder to go everywhere in New York, but no, anytime these kind of initiatives happen, it's usually a success. They started often as a pilot project. Oh, let's try this out, and everybody loves it, and they keep it. So let's have more of this, please.
Yeah, I was in New York once too, and I went to Brooklyn underground, and that was the one time that there was a terrorist attack before 9/11.
What?
And there was a terrorist attempt at that very subway in 1997 in July. There was a terrorist plot to bomb the Brooklyn subway line.
Wow.
And I was taking that back and forth, because we had parked in Brooklyn and went to Manhattan.
Wow.
On the very day. So yeah, shit for luck I have. That was, I'm alive to talk about it, so I guess I am lucky, but it's just kind of a weird coincidence. From Electric, a new plan known as NYC 25 by 25, which is backed by the mayor, says that all these streets in New York, 25% of the space will be taken away from cars and converted into walkable pedestrian plazas, which, I always see them get mixed reactions, even in New York, in some places. Bike lanes, green space, and bus lanes by 2025. I think that's a great idea. I just don't know how exactly it would look and how it would look in different cities. And I'm not familiar enough with New York City to understand how that would work, but it seems like it would improve things. And, speaking of bike sharing in New York, they have electric bike sharing there now. So you could just walk in and pick up. Oh, that'd be nice. That's the way to vacation, people. I can tell you from experience. I rented just a normal bike in Hawaii, and, there's no better way. I mean, ostensibly an electric motorcycle, but then you're taking more of your life in your hands. Perhaps it's more dangerous. But I really think, to not be surrounded by metal and glass, to actually be out and smell everything and see everything and hear everything in a place that you haven't been to before is just a fantastic way to do things.
Yeah, I tried to figure that out once in Los Angeles. I was going to rent a bike in Los Angeles, but I never quite managed it. And I thought, I should have just gone to Walmart and bought like a cheap bike or something.
Oh, man, yes. I keep thinking to do that because you could buy in the States, it's probably like you could buy an $80 bike.
Yeah.
If you bring some bike tools, because you'll need them. My chain did break in Hawaii, and I had to find a bike shop to buy a tool to fix it. That's the nice thing about not having a chain is hopefully your rubber pulley there will work fine.
Yeah.
So the logic goes that a vast majority of New York City streets are being dominated with cars doesn't benefit most city residents. It only benefits those few bastards in cars. And it doesn't really benefit cars either because they're just, the average speed is 8 kilometers an hour. And guess what? Walking speed, it's about that, 5 miles an hour, 7 or 8 kilometers an hour. With me, now I hobble at about -1 kilometer an hour. I'm bad shape. But in Midtown Manhattan, that's the way it is. So cars really aren't having a fun time there. All they do is honk constantly. Have you noticed that in New York? They just honk constantly for no reason.
No, it's crazy. There's just constant honking. It's weird.
There's no motivation behind it. It's like I haven't honked in 3 seconds, I'll honk. So just to, they should have their horns turned off is what they should do. So private automobile transportation in NYC is responsible for a significant portion of the city's carbon emissions, air pollution, and urban grime. Brian, the luxury version of the Kia EV6 is out.
Genesis,
the luxury brand name of Kia. It's $59,000 US. It has approximately 240 miles of range, 380 kilometers, and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, okay, well, it looks the same, but that's luxurious, and there's some wood where there's some plastic, but I don't know. Or would you buy a luxury car like that, or would you buy the regular version if you liked that car?
Well, I do like the styling. I do prefer the styling, and I kind of like the Genesis brand. It's kind of nice, but that range is just a little bit low, unfortunately. So to spend that much money and only get that range is not great.
Speaking of the Kia Hyundai group of companies, Hyundai is going to announce a $7 billion EV plant in Georgia during Biden's visit to South Korea. I was going to say Georgia, but no, he's going to South Korea to announce the plant in Georgia.
Mm-hmm. He's probably better liked in South Korea than Georgia anyway. So
that's true. His ratings are through the roof in South Korea. They're above 30%. There, now I'm dissing him. I'm doing what Elon does. He's a perfectly stable president. Not a genius, but he's stable.
Yes.
And stable is good.
Yes.
I like stable. I don't know. I wish abortion rights going on down there. I don't know. I'm not comfortable with opening a business in a lot of states, should Tesla have gone to Texas? I don't know. It's going to bring more people there that might vote the tech industry and that might vote differently, but it's just uncomfortable when I see more businesses going to some of those flyover states that don't really appreciate the rights of women. Anyway, that is our time for this week. Brian Stockton, it's been good talking to you. I'm incredibly tired. I can't believe I made it through the show without screwing everything up. We'll talk to you next week. If you're new to the show, be sure to subscribe, or as the kids say nowadays, follow the podcast on your app that you're listening to podcasts with so you get new shows delivered every week. And I can't wait to talk again next week.
Yeah, see you next week.